I can still vividly remember the night that changed my life forever. It was a Friday evening, and my girlfriend, Emily, and I decided to hit up this new nightclub in town. We had been dating for almost 2 years, and though our relationship had its ups and downs, I thought we were solid. The night started off great. We danced, laughed, and drank a bit more than we probably should have. Emily was wearing this stunning red dress that hugged her in all the right places, and she was the center of attention. As the night went on, Emily's drinking got a little out of hand. She was downing shots like water, and before I knew it, she was pretty wasted. I tried to keep an eye on her, but with the crowd and the chaos, it wasn't easy. At one point, I lost sight of her. Panic set in, but I convinced myself she was just dancing somewhere or in the restroom. I waited, hoping she'd come back soon. 20 minutes passed, and she still wasn't back. I decided to check the restroom. As I made my way through the crowded dance floor, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing in the pit of my stomach. When I reached the restroom area, I waited outside, hoping she'd come out, but she didn't. It wasn't until I saw 2 guys walk out of the women's restroom, laughing and high-fiving each other, that I started to worry. Something felt off. I waited a few more minutes before Emily finally stumbled out, her hair disheveled and makeup smudged. She looked at me with this guilty, almost fearful expression, but quickly composed herself. "Hey, sorry, I wasn't feeling too well," she slurred, trying to brush it off. I wanted to believe her, so I did. We went home, and she passed out almost immediately, but something inside me felt broken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I had this nagging feeling that something terrible had happened, but I had no idea just how bad it really was. Little did I know, the events of that night had been caught on camera by some jerk looking for a quick viral hit, and it was only a matter of time before the truth would come crashing down on me. The following morning, Emily acted like nothing had happened. She was hungover, sure, but she seemed more concerned with getting some greasy breakfast to cure her headache than addressing the strange events of the night before. I tried to shake off the unease that still clung to me and focused on helping her feel better. Days went by, and everything seemed to return to normal. But then, one evening, while scrolling through my social media feed, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a video posted on a local nightlife page, with the caption, "Wild Night at Club Mirage." I tapped on it, my heart pounding. The video showed snippets of people dancing, laughing, and having a good time. But then, the footage shifted. My breath caught in my throat as I saw Emily, unmistakable in her red dress, being led into the bathroom by 2 guys. The video cut to a shaky clip of the 3 of them in one of the stalls, and what I saw next made me want to vomit. Emily was clearly drunk, barely able to stand, as the 2 guys took advantage of her. The video was explicit and left nothing to the imagination. I felt a mix of anger, disgust, and heartbreak wash over me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I replayed the video multiple times, hoping I was mistaken, but the grim reality was undeniable. My hands were shaking as I put my phone down. I couldn't breathe. How could she do this to me? The betrayal cut deep, and the humiliation of knowing that this intimate moment was now public was unbearable. I wanted to confront Emily right away, but a darker part of me wanted to plot a much more satisfying revenge. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. Emily was beside me, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. I stared at the ceiling, plotting my next moves. Confronting her would come, but first, I needed to deal with the 2 guys in the video. I needed to find out who they were and make them pay. The next few days, I became a man on a mission. Through the nightclub's social media posts and some internet sleuthing, I managed to identify the 2 guys. They were friends, frequent visitors of Club Mirage, and their profiles showed them living the kind of life where they probably thought they were untouchable. Little did they know, their actions had consequences, and I was determined to make them regret what they did. What they had done to Emily was beyond unforgivable, but my thoughts kept circling back to her betrayal. She had been a willing participant, drunk or not, and as I sat there, watching her sleep peacefully beside me, I knew I needed to make sure she understood the gravity of her actions too. But first, I would deal with the guys. Revenge was a dish best served cold, and I was just getting started. Fueled by rage and a burning need for revenge, I spent every free moment planning my next steps. I started with the guys. Their names were Derek and Jason, and it didn't take long to track down their social media profiles and learn more about them. They lived together in a house on the outskirts of town, and from what I could tell, they were both regulars at Club Mirage. I decided to pay them a visit. One evening, I drove by their house to get a lay of the land. It was a modest 2-story house with a decent-sized front yard. They had 2 cars, a flashy red sports car and a beat-up old truck, parked in the driveway. The sight of those cars made my blood boil even more. I knew what I had to do. A few days later, I gathered the tools I needed for my plan. I bought a sturdy aluminum baseball bat and a can of gasoline. I felt a mix of nerves and anticipation as I prepared for what was to come. I knew the risk I was taking, but the thought of making them pay for what they did kept me focused. Late one night, I drove to their house, parking a few blocks away to avoid suspicion. The streets were quiet and the house was dark. I crept through the shadows, my heart pounding in my chest, and made my way to the front door. With a deep breath, I rang the doorbell and stepped back, gripping the bat tightly in my hands. A few moments later, Derek opened the door, looking groggy and confused. "Who the hell are you?" he muttered, rubbing his eyes. I didn't give him a chance to react. I swung the bat with all my strength, hitting him square in the stomach. He doubled over in pain, and I pushed past him into the house. Jason came rushing down the stairs, yelling, but he was too late. I swung the bat again, catching him in the knee and sending him crashing to the floor. Both of them lay on the ground, groaning in pain. I stood over them, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You think you can just get away with what you did?" I snarled. "You picked the wrong guy to mess with." I didn't stop there. I wanted them to feel the same helplessness and fear that Emily must have felt. I continued to swing the bat, hitting them over and over until they were both battered and bruised. The sound of their cries echoed through the house, but I didn't care. They deserved every bit of pain they were feeling. Once I was satisfied, I walked back to their driveway and doused their cars with gasoline. The smell was pungent, but it didn't deter me. I struck a match and threw it onto the cars, watching as the flames erupted and consumed the vehicles. The fire blazed brightly, illuminating the night and filling the air with the acrid scent of burning metal and rubber. I stood there for a moment, watching the flames dance. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but as the adrenaline began to wear off, the reality of what I had done started to sink in. I had taken my revenge on Derek and Jason, but Emily was still a loose end. She had betrayed me just as much as they had, and I knew I couldn't move on until I confronted her. As I drove away from the scene, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of revenge would be fitting for her. She had hidden her betrayal from me, and I needed to make sure she felt the same sense of betrayal and loss that I did. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more satisfying than the last. Whatever I decided, I knew one thing for sure: Emily was going to pay. The day after I dealt with Derek and Jason, I couldn't bring myself to look at Emily. The sight of her, acting like everything was normal, only fueled my anger. I knew I had to confront her, but I wanted to do it in a way that would make her feel the weight of her betrayal. I needed her to understand the pain she had caused me. That evening, I suggested we have a date night. Emily, oblivious to the turmoil inside me, happily agreed. We went to our favorite restaurant, a cozy little Italian place downtown. The whole time, I played the role of the loving boyfriend, masking my true feelings behind a facade of smiles and laughter. She seemed to enjoy herself, completely unaware of the storm brewing within me. After dinner, we walked back to my place. The tension was building inside me, and I knew the moment of truth was near. Once we were inside, I suggested we have a glass of wine. Emily agreed, and as she went to freshen up, I prepared the living room for what was about to come. I set up my laptop on the coffee table and pulled up the video that had shattered my world. My hands trembled as I paused it at the exact moment she entered the bathroom with Derek and Jason. Emily returned, a smile on her face, and sat down next to me. "I have something I need to show you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. "What is it?" I hit play, and the video started. At first, she didn't seem to understand what she was watching, but as the scene unfolded, her face turned pale. She covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide with shock and horror. "How could you?" I said, my voice cold and trembling with barely contained rage. "How could you do this to me?" Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head, unable to find the words to respond. I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. Don't give me that, I shouted, my anger boiling over. You knew exactly what you were doing. You betrayed me and you lied to me, and now the whole world knows about it. She sobbed uncontrollably, but I felt no sympathy. She had brought this upon herself. I'm sorry, she managed to choke out between sobs. I didn't mean for this to happen. Sorry doesn't cut it, I said, my voice cold and unforgiving. You humiliated me. You made me a fool in front of everyone, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth. I was scared, she whispered. I didn't want to lose you. Well, you did, I said, my heart aching with the finality of my words. You lost me the moment you decided to cheat on me, and now it's time for you to face the consequences. Emily looked up at me, her eyes filled with fear and regret. What are you going to do? You'll find out soon enough, I said, standing up and walking towards the door. But first you need to leave. I can't stand to look at you right now. She stood up, her body trembling. Please, don't do this. We can work through this. I love you. I shook my head, feeling a mix of sadness and anger. You should have thought of that before you cheated on me. Now, get out. She grabbed her things and left, her sobs echoing through the empty hallway. As I watched her go, I felt a hollow emptiness inside me. The revenge on Derek and Jason had been satisfying, but confronting Emily left me feeling more broken than ever. I knew I needed to do something more to truly make her understand the pain she had caused. And as I sat there, alone in my apartment, a plan began to form in my mind. It was time for Emily to experience the same betrayal and heartbreak that she had inflicted on me. After Emily left, I spent the next few days planning my next move. My confrontation with her had left me feeling hollow and unsatisfied. She needed to feel the same pain, betrayal, and humiliation I did, but on an even deeper level. I was determined to make her understand the gravity of her actions. I started by reaching out to a few mutual friends. I told them Emily and I were going through a rough patch, which wasn't far from the truth. I wanted to gauge their reactions and see who might be sympathetic to my side. I found one friend, Megan, who seemed particularly interested. Megan and I had always had a bit of chemistry, though I never acted on it out of loyalty to Emily. Now, that loyalty was gone. Megan and I started spending more time together. I confided in her about the cheating, without going into the graphic details. She was outraged on my behalf and offered a shoulder to lean on. I could tell she harbored a certain disdain for Emily, which made her the perfect accomplice for my plan. One evening, after a few drinks, I brought up an idea to Megan. You know, it would be great if we could show Emily how it feels to be betrayed by someone she trusts. Megan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you have in mind? We need to make her believe I've moved on, I said, leaning in closer. I want to stage a situation where she catches us together. It needs to be convincing, and it needs to hurt her as much as she hurt me. Megan considered this for a moment before nodding. I'm in. She deserves to know what it feels like. We spent the next few days plotting the perfect scenario. We decided on a Saturday evening, knowing Emily had plans to visit her sister, but would likely return home earlier than usual. Megan would come over to my place, and we would set the stage for Emily to walk in on us in a compromising position. The day finally arrived, and Megan showed up at my apartment. We went over the plan one last time, making sure everything was in place. I texted Emily, asking her to come over when she was done at her sister's. She replied that she'd be there in about an hour, giving us just enough time to set everything up. Megan and I started with a few drinks to loosen up. We wanted to make the scenario as believable as possible. As the time drew closer, we moved to the living room and started making out, ensuring the scene was convincing enough to shatter Emily's heart. I heard the sound of keys in the lock, and my heart raced with anticipation. Emily walked in, her face lighting up as she called out, "Hey, I'm home!" The moment she stepped into the living room, her expression changed from joy to utter devastation. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she saw Megan and me entangled on the couch. "What the hell is going on?" she screamed, tears already streaming down her face. Megan jumped up, pretending to be embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't mean for you to find out this way." Emily turned to me, her voice shaking with rage and sorrow. "How could you do this to me?" I stood up, feigning guilt and remorse. "Emily, I couldn't take it anymore. After what you did, I needed to move on. I needed to find someone who wouldn't betray me." She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I thought we could fix things. I thought you still loved me. I did love you, I said coldly, but you destroyed that when you cheated on me. Now you know how it feels. Emily's cries echoed through the apartment as Megan and I exchanged a quick, satisfied glance. The plan had worked perfectly. But as I watched Emily break down, a part of me felt a pang of regret. Revenge had been sweet, but the bitter aftertaste lingered. As Emily stumbled out of the apartment, shattered and heartbroken, I realized that my quest for vengeance had changed me. I had become someone I barely recognized, but there was no turning back now. The damage was done, and all I could do was live with the consequences. In the days following the setup, I couldn't shake the image of Emily's devastated face from my mind. The sweet taste of revenge quickly soured as guilt crept in. Megan, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. We continued to spend time together, but the thrill of plotting against Emily had worn off, leaving an awkward tension between us. Emily had moved out of our apartment, crashing with a friend while she figured out her next steps. She didn't try to contact me, and I didn't reach out to her. The silence was deafening, but I told myself it was for the best. I needed to move on, even if it meant embracing the darkness I had unleashed within myself. One evening, about a week later, Megan and I were having drinks at my place. We were sitting in silence, the once vibrant connection between us now replaced by an uneasy awkwardness. Megan finally broke the silence. "Do you think she'll ever forgive you?" I shrugged, taking a long sip of my drink. "Does it matter? She deserved it." Megan frowned, setting her glass down. "I don't know. Watching her break down like that, it felt wrong. Maybe we went too far." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had been so focused on my own pain that I hadn't considered the full impact of my actions. Megan's sudden change of heart made me question everything. I pushed the thoughts aside, not ready to face the depth of my betrayal. A few days later, I received a message from an unknown number. The text was short and chilling. "We need to talk. Meet me at the park." My heart raced as I stared at the screen. Emily wanted to talk. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her, but curiosity and a sense of unfinished business drove me to agree. I texted back, confirming the time and place. The next evening, I arrived at the park, the sun setting in the distance. I spotted Emily sitting on a bench, looking out over the pond. She seemed lost in thought, her posture tense and guarded. I approached cautiously, unsure of what to expect. She turned to me as I sat down beside her. Her eyes were red and puffy, but there was a steely resolve in her gaze. "I don't know why I'm here," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Maybe I just need closure." I nodded, unsure of what to say. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. She finally asked, her voice cracking, "Why did you have to hurt me like that?" I know what I did was unforgivable. But why? I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Because I needed you to feel the pain you caused me. I wanted you to understand what it felt like to be betrayed by someone you trusted completely." She looked away, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Well, congratulations. You succeeded. But did it make you feel any better?" Her question hung in the air, and I realized with a sinking feeling that it hadn't. Revenge had given me a fleeting sense of satisfaction, but it had also left me hollow and empty. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily wiped her tears, her expression softening. "We were both wrong. We hurt each other in ways that can't be undone, but continuing this cycle of pain won't fix anything. It'll only destroy us further." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been so consumed by my need for revenge that I hadn't considered the possibility of healing. Maybe it was too late for us, but it wasn't too late for me to change. "I'm sorry, Emily," I said, my voice breaking, "for everything. I let my anger consume me, and I hurt you more than I ever imagined. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say it." She nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and understanding. "I'm sorry too, for betraying you, for everything. I don't know what the future holds, but I hope we can both find a way to move on from this." We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun dip below the horizon. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. As we parted ways, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I couldn't undo the past, but I could choose a different path moving forward. In the weeks following my meeting with Emily, I focused on trying to rebuild my life. The confrontation had been a turning point, forcing me to face the ugliness of my actions and the need for change. I had started seeing a therapist to help process my emotions and figure out how to move forward. It was a slow process, but I was beginning to find some semblance of peace. One day, while at my therapist's office, we were discussing the night everything went wrong. She asked about the guys who had taken advantage of Emily. It was a topic I had tried to avoid, focusing more on my relationship with Emily and the fallout from my revenge. But my therapist pressed, wanting to understand the full extent of what happened. "Have you considered what those men did to her?" she asked gently. "They violated her trust and her body. They didn't just hurt you, they hurt her too. Have you thought about holding them accountable for their actions?" Her words hit me hard. I had been so focused on my own pain and seeking revenge that I hadn't fully grasped the severity of what Derek and Jason had done. Emily was a victim too, even if she had been complicit in the initial act. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't let them get away with what they did. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept returning to the idea of justice, not just for me, but for Emily as well. I knew what I had to do. It was time to put aside my anger and focus on doing the right thing. The next day, I went to the police station. I brought with me a copy of the video that had been posted online, along with all the information I had gathered about Derek and Jason. It wasn't easy, but I explained everything to the detective on duty, providing as much detail as possible. The detective took my statement seriously and assured me they would investigate the matter. I felt a sense of relief, knowing that I had taken a step towards righting the wrongs that had been done. It wasn't enough to just hurt them physically. They needed to face real consequences for their actions. As the investigation progressed, I kept my distance from Emily, not wanting to add any more stress to her life. I knew she was dealing with her own issues, and I didn't want to complicate things further, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she deserved to know what I was doing. One evening, I decided to call her. When she answered, her voice was cautious, as if she wasn't sure what to expect. "Emily, it's Alex," I began, taking a deep breath. "I need to tell you something important." "What is it?" she asked, her tone wary. "I've gone to the police about Derek and Jason," I said. "I gave them the video and all the information I have. They're investigating it now." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice filled with confusion and emotion. "Because what they did to you was wrong," I said firmly, "and they need to be held accountable. It's not just about me or what happened between us. It's about making sure they can't hurt anyone else." Emily was silent for a moment, and then I heard her sniffle. "Thank you. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," I replied softly. "I just wanted you to know. We may not be together anymore, but that doesn't mean I don't care about what happens to you." As we ended the call, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a step in the right direction. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was doing something good, something that could make a real difference. A few weeks later, I received a call from the detective. Derek and Jason had been arrested and were facing charges for what they had done to Emily. The case was moving forward, and there was a strong chance they would be convicted. Justice was being served, and it felt like a new chapter was beginning. I had taken my revenge, but now I was finding a path to healing and redemption. Life would never be the same, but at least I could face the future knowing I had done the right thing. The news of Derek and Jason's arrest spread quickly. It was a small town, and word traveled fast. I kept to myself, avoiding the whispers and sideways glances. People who knew me, who knew Emily, couldn't seem to decide whether to treat me like a hero or a pariah. I didn't care anymore. I had done what was right, and that was all that mattered. Emily and I hadn't spoken since I told her about the police. I figured she needed time to process everything, just as I did. My therapy sessions continued, and I found myself gradually coming to terms with the events that had shattered my life. The therapist helped me see that I couldn't let anger and revenge define me. I had to find a way to rebuild, to move forward. One afternoon, I decided to visit the park where Emily and I had our last conversation. It was a place of mixed emotions for me, but I felt drawn to it. As I walked through the park, I saw families playing, couples strolling hand in hand, and kids laughing. Life was moving on, and I needed to do the same. I found the bench where we had sat and took a seat, staring out at the pond. The memories of that day flooded back, but this time they felt different, less painful, more like a chapter in a book that I had finally finished reading. Just as I was about to leave, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Alex? I turned to see Emily standing there, looking uncertain but determined. Can I sit? She asked, gesturing to the bench. Of course, I replied, scooting over to make room. We sat in silence for a few moments, both of us unsure how to start. Finally, Emily spoke. I heard about Derek and Jason. Thank you for doing that. I nodded. It was the right thing to do. They needed to be held accountable. Emily sighed, looking down at her hands. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us, about everything that happened. I know we can't go back, but I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. Truly sorry for what I did. I hurt you in ways I can't even begin to understand, and I hate myself for it. Her words were sincere, and I could see the pain in her eyes. It mirrored my own. I'm sorry too, I said quietly. I let my anger control me, and I did things I'm not proud of. We both made mistakes, and we both paid the price. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I've started seeing a therapist, trying to work through my issues. I want to be a better person, for myself and for others. I'm glad to hear that, I said, offering a small smile. I've been doing the same. It's not easy, but it's worth it. We sat there for a while, talking about our progress, our plans, and our hopes for the future. It was a bittersweet conversation, filled with regret but also with a glimmer of hope. We both knew we couldn't erase the past, but we could learn from it and strive to be better. As the sun began to set, we stood up, ready to part ways. Alex, take care of yourself, Emily said, giving me a sincere smile. You too, Emily, I replied. I wish you all the best. We hugged briefly, a gesture of closure and mutual understanding. Then we walked away, each heading in our own direction. It was a new beginning, not just for me but for both of us. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I found a new job, made new friends, and continued my therapy. It wasn't always easy, but I was slowly finding my way. Emily and I didn't keep in touch, but I knew she was doing the same, working on herself and finding her path. Life had a way of moving on, no matter how deep the scars, and as I stood at the threshold of my future, I knew that I had the strength to face whatever came next. Betrayal had taught me many hard lessons, but it had also shown me the importance of forgiveness, both for others and for myself. And so, I continued to live, carrying the weight of the past, but no longer letting it define me. I was ready to embrace the possibilities of tomorrow, one day at a time.